to be human. We don't see people as sick. We don't need to fix them. We don't need to see people as broken. They don't need to be cured. We see people as being stuck because we're kind of caught in our own patterns and cycles of what we're doing. And so my job is usually to help people figure out better questions rather than better answers. If you have good questions, the answer is inevitable. If the questions are not so good, the answers, no matter how brilliant, are relatively irrelevant. So most of what it is that I do is based upon brain science, based upon neurology. How does the brain work? I find it actually very fascinating, so that almost everything we're going to be talking about today is actually how the brain works, and how it works for us, and how it works against us. As the rabbi was mentioning, there's a lot of concerns about COVID-19. There's been a lot of stressors with it. Most of the information has been a little bit confusing, primarily because it's still a work in progress. Biorad, a very famous science lab, was working on the H1N1 back then, and working with other viruses. And when they worked with 10 years ago, they finally nailed now. It takes a long time to actually know what's going on. Despite Amazon, you can't ask the question and expect it to be delivered on your door tomorrow. So we have a lot of data, and it's very confusing, and it's hard to find what are things that we really can do. What also makes it difficult is that we're humans. And we don't walk into the COVID-19 experience with a blank slate. We all have history. And the pressures of the stressors of COVID-19, of just the way the world is today, starts amplifying. It's an accelerant of the different fears, the different thoughts that we have inside that make things difficult for us. When we're coping with shelter in place, shelter in place is an opportunity to grow. Unfortunately, it's to grow together or to grow farther apart. Routines get disrupted. They force us to slow down and pay attention. When we slow down, it allows us to pay attention to the meaning of things, at which point we can use those to grow and to evolve, or we can use those to entrench ourselves further into meanings that aren't useful to us. Conflicts that were previously avoided are being addressed now. Dealing with physical distancing. We're separating the we from the me. We're seeing people who do it out of caring for each other, and those who are saying, don't tell me what to do. The financial stressors, very real. Lost jobs, layoffs, new ways of doing new jobs, new ways of doing the old job that we're not really used to. So what are some things that help? Since we have some new phases here, I'd like to tell a story that I've told at the other presentations. And that's just the story of the wise old man, Navajo Indian. People would come from hundreds of miles around to sit at his feet, and he would talk. And he would tell stories without anybody asking him any questions. He just tells stories. And at the end of the time, people would get up and they would leave. And each one of them felt that he had talked directly to them. And he gave them exactly what they had needed. Well, he had a little granddaughter and a grandson who lived right there with him, there in the little community. They really lucked out because every afternoon they go sit in front of Grandpa, okay? And they would, sit, and he would tell them all the creation myths and the animal spirits and the spirit guides and all this. And one of the things he taught them was there are two spirits, spirit animals within us. And these two spirits animals within us fight. They're wolves. One is the wolf of joy, of sharing, of cooperation, of compassion, of love, of abundance. The other is the wolf of fear, of anger, of resentment, of jealousy, of rage. And they fight. And they fight to the death. Well, the kids are getting a little nervous about this, and they go, "Grandpa, how do you know which one's going to win?" And Grandpa looked at him and said, "It depends on the one you feed." Well, that's us. The problem is our tribal tendencies often get us to feed the wrong wolf. Remember, humanity was not created last week. We're a work in progress, coming a long way from our hunter-gatherer tribal history. Well, in the tribal history, we have a brain that was designed to deal with that particular situation in being in the tribe, in the wilds out there. And one of the things that our brain wants us to do, okay, is to notice those things that fit within our worldview. It's called a confirmation bias. This is sort of a natural thing. That if I'm going to predict something's going to happen, I'm only going to look for those things that reinforce what's going to happen rather than indicators that it's not going to happen. I'm looking for the other ones. That's the confirmation bias. We're attracted to the negative. Our brain was designed for survival. Limbic system. Limbic system's right underneath the cortex. The big thing here. Underneath it, there's this little flat thing with little arms sticking out. It's called the limbic system. Limbic system is the area of the brain that gets you to jump before you know whether it's a rope or a snake. It would rather have you be embarrassed than bit. And so what it does immediately is it notices what's in the current environment. That is exactly what happened in the past that you want to avoid again. It is there for survival to notice how the current situation is similar to the past so that you can survive faster, have a quicker response. That takes 50 milliseconds to see something and get a feeling of what was going on back then. Problem, it's incapable of identifying how the current situation is different from what was back then. So, to do that, you need your frontal lobe. Your frontal lobe takes between 30 seconds to 3 minutes to be able to identify how the current situation is different from the past. That's just to find the right question to identify the difference. But again, how things are similar, 50 milliseconds. It's instantaneous. And therefore, we're going to be more aware of what's wrong. It's going to beat what's right every time, because that's survival. We've got pattern recognition. It's another area of the brain. It wants to predict information. It's trying to find order in the chaos. There's a problem. This sensory stalk that we have on our head, okay, with all the sounds coming out and the light coming in and the tastes and touch and all that sort of thing, metaphorically, it only has 2 gigs of data per second it can load in. And there are how many petabytes of data out there? Huge amounts. So you've got this amount, and you've got this amount you can go and look at any time. So you're sampling all these different things. And what we're doing is we're gathering enough samples to make sense so we can make a decision. We're trying to find a pattern. Problem again, we're back to bias confirmation. What it's going to do? It's going to get us to notice those things that we're already assuming. It's going to be harder to see new things. It's easier to see old things. Plus, we've got a herd bias. That means that if you're a bunch of antelope, if you're an antelope in a herd, and the herd all lifts their head up and heads off and starts running immediately, if you stick around and wonder what's going to happen is you're going to be someone's lunch. So when the herd moves, we all go with it. It is a natural instinct of survival. Think about, Facebook, okay? There is so much pressure for us to do, and it comes from a very natural survival base. Okay, this gets in the way. One of the biggest stressors that we have during COVID-19, unfortunately, is the media. The media sells advertising. The media is entertainment. It is the news. It isn't necessarily reporting the news. It creates it. And the tone of voice that they use is enough to make your hair fall. I watched way too much television as a kid. Anyway, so one of the first things that we have to do, and this might be speaking to the choir in this case, but we really have to be very selective of how much you watch, because the sense of urgency and intensity that comes from the voices coming at you kicks in that limbic system that you're talking about. And your entire judgment circuits start falling out. And we're just looking for identification of what's dangerous. And it makes it harder to value what's good, what we have blessings, what we appreciate, what we value. It's harder because it generates such fear reactions. And it's not a choice on our part. You hear that tone of voice, and you have what are called mirror neurons, and they will reflect that tone inside your body, and that's how we're going to feel. So one of the things that's important to do is to be very selective, and I far prefer the written word, because then I'm not getting as much of the tone. I can pick it up once in a while. I have a general theory, not theory, it's a way I do things, let's just put it that way. And that in terms of television, my thought is, if I'm not willing to record the program and watch it for the first time a week from now, I probably don't want to watch it now. So the repetitive types of news that is very much sensationalist, painful. And yet we have to watch it. We have to get the information. But the question is, does the information give us information what to do, or is it just something that kind of riles us up? I created a thing called the Landis Serenity Prayer. Most people are familiar with the Serenity Prayer. That starts out, God grant me the serenity to accept those things that I cannot change. Okay, we're familiar with that. I feel mine's a little bit more dynamic and not quite as fixed. And it's, God grant the serenity to accept those things I cannot change, given the information, the resources I happen to have at this moment. The courage to change those things I can change, given that the cost-benefit ratio's in my favor. What it costs me is not greater than the difference that I make. And the wisdom to know the difference between the two, given that as new information and resources show up, I need to check in to see if I need more courage or more serenity, because I may have new options that are coming in. It's constantly checking. But if what it is we're listening to doesn't really give us a direction for action, then it's starting to cost us. Our emotions are designed to give us information, to help us make better decisions. It tells what's called saliency. Emotions tell you what's important to you. The key is for them to serve us, not to own us. And so I like the serenity prayer because what it's really saying is that what you're watching, what you're talking about, what you're hearing, is it a problem to solve at this moment? Or is it a situation to kind of get through? Okay. Other things that we can do. Just to put this in perspective, what I'm trying to do when we're trying to decrease the stress, if you can imagine our stress load as being this rain barrel with a drain out the bottom and all sorts of stuff coming into it. As long as what comes in goes out just as fast as it comes in, the barrel's doing its job. We can handle that. At the point that what's coming in comes in faster than the drain can go out, and it overflows, that's when our body starts falling apart, when our relationships start falling apart. Our ability to make decisions is highly compromised because we are beyond whelmed when that happens. One problem is certain things can happen that'll squeeze down the drain. That's our physical condition, our health. Okay, our relationships, what we put into there, how much we expose ourselves to. So what we're trying to do is to find a balance. So by using the Serenity Prayer, we decrease what's going into it by no longer trying to solve a situation. It doesn't work. That we save our energy for the problems that can be solved in this situation and this time. Physical activity is another way of opening that drain. But I'd like to suggest doing physical activity with a with a twist. You've heard everybody say, go out there and walk at least 30 minutes a day, and that's great for you. What I'd like to suggest is you piggyback it, and that you do walking as a mindful meditation, as an ability to clear the mind. As you clear your mind and you bring up that positive wolf, it opens up the drain and it allows you to wash through a lot of that stress a lot faster. So doing mindfulness is merely as you walk, notice how your body feels as you're walking. Noticing the movement, the muscles. Notice the sensations of either the sun or the mist or the water sprinkler you just went through, whatever, but really pay attention to the sensation of it without making a judgment about it. Noticing it. Noticing the flowers in people's yards. Focus on one particular flower as you approach it and as you walk away, and notice how the color actually changes based upon the angle that you have. Pay attention to, in the moment, without any judgment whatsoever, just what is in front of you, the experience. What ends up happening is you not only get the benefits of the physical walking, but you feel like you've gotten a hug. And that's a good thing. What it does is it allows the body actually to open up more. It allows things to flow through rather than get clogged. The other one is doing a thing called a compassionate projection. And I like this one, because it's kind of feeds into my natural tendency toward grandiosity. And that is, as I walk down, I notice people's houses. And we walk in them, my wife and I walk in neighborhoods that we haven't, we normally don't pass. We don't go a lot in. And so there are new houses that we see. Or we see changes that have happened in houses that are familiar. And it's easy to create a story about the people inside of how they're coping with the current situation, with the sheltering, in place, dealing with illnesses, what have you. You can usually see at houses whether they've got kids or not. It's kind of obvious. Okay. And to create a story, don't worry about if it's accurate or not. It just needs to be one of compassion, because we're all working through things. And as you walk by, you say the 4 magic words, I wish for you. And with as much sincerity as you can muster, you focus and you go, I wish for you. Now, you have to, what you're wishing for is from a list of different qualities, experiences that you want for yourself. That's right. You've got a list of what you want, but what you're doing is you're projecting it onto them, and you have to do it sincerely. Okay? I wish for you peace, joy, happiness, comfort, delight, curiosity, love, whatever it is that's important to you. I wish for you. You don't have to flap your arm like that. Okay. What ends up happening? Something rather fascinating. And this is, again, how the brain works. And that is 2 billion of your brain cells are the focal point of consciousnthis. The other 100 billion are doing something else, and we're not aware of what they're doing when they're doing it. And this part of the brain we call the unconscious, it's not really the unconscious. It's not a single thing. It's a lot of different processes, some of which don't even know the others exist. Some work against them, some work for them. It's a real mishmash. Okay. Again, it's not so much that I think it's amazing that how amazing the brain is. I think it's amazing that it works, the way that it kind of mishmashes around. Okay. There's the area of the brain that when you do that, it actually assumes you're giving them a wonderful gift. Okay? It's kind of gullible. Okay, I wish for you, and it goes, oh, that's cool. Now, anytime you give to someone of yourself freely and openly, it strengthens the immune system. It increases the killer T cells. It stabilizes it so that it quiets down the cytokines, interleukin 6 and 1. Both of those are the ones that amplify inflammation. This is the thing that we're most worried about dealing with COVID-19. Okay, and what it does is it quiets, interestingly enough, it quiets it in the liver. Okay, who knew? Okay, it quiets its production, and what you end up having is a more stable immune system that's less reactive. Okay, but it's robust. That's kind of nice. I wish for you. But wait, there's more. When you do that, that part of the brain assumes you actually have something to give. Okay, because you can't give something unless you have something to give. Okay, so you give that. It uses the same brain process that people have when they have PTSD. But it's in the opposite direction. It's the same limbic system area, but what it does is it says, if I'm wishing for you, confidence, something like that, it assumes that I have to have some to give. So it's going to go through my entire history and find those times in which I was experiencing confidence. And it doesn't matter how long it lasted or what it was for. It could be confidence that I finally learned how to tie my shoelaces. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's an experience. It's not tied to any event. And what it then does is the next time you need confidence, what you're going to do is you're going to get a little boost, sort of like post-therapeutic rather than post-traumatic. Okay, and so if you so have joy, you're hoping them for joy, you find yourself a little more bubbly, happy, feel a little bit, the smile's a little tighter, a little up there, okay? That it actually enhances your own positive experiences. And during this time, that really opens up the drain, okay? That's a real good one. The other one has to do when we're talking about mindfulness. and not judging. Where you walk by and you just notice. Situations like that are relatively easy. However, if we are, we're sheltered in place, okay, and these are people that we really love in moderation, that when you're with them after a while, he's still sucking his teeth, isn't he? It can get to you. The handout that I've given to you for that, if you've downloaded that, it's called the 9 Attitudes, and it is actually from a YouTube, which I thought was so concise. It's really nice, from John Kabat-Zinn. And it's the 9 Attitudes of, okay. And he gives a whole list of different attitudes that if you practice them, in fact, you open up the drain even more. Okay? And what you find is that you naturally are more selective of what you allow in. It's just a very nice, simple thing. It's just a lot of work. So the one that I like out of the whole group that is no work whatsoever is the second one that's called non-judging. Okay? Non-judgment. It doesn't say not judging. It says non-judging, because our brain is designed to make judgments. It has to, because if you don't make a judgment, you'll never come to a conclusion. We come to a conclusion when we get tired of thinking, okay? Because there's always so much more information that you could get. It's good enough, let's go for it. Okay, that sort of thing. But there are certain reflexes that we have, and some of them are not very attractive. The us versus them is a very natural response. My tribe versus someone else's tribe. When we were hunter-gatherers, we'd live off the land. And after a while, we've used up all the food, and we'd move 5 miles down the track, maybe 10 miles, and start over again. Okay, cool. What we did not want is another tribe 5 miles ahead of us. Okay, we're kind of territorial in that sort of thing. So there is this, this reflex of us versus them. My tribe, my identification. I want to be a bigger fish in a smaller puddle. So therefore, I can't look at it as an ocean. I have to just look at it as little puddles. This sort of thing. It limits me. Okay, how do we get away from some of this? This particular practice is very simple. It says, just notice when you do it. Okay? Someone is doing something. They're saying something. You're overhearing it, and you go, you have this natural reflex of dismissing them, or what are they thinking, or how could they be, this sort of thing. What this practice asks you to do is just notice it. That's it. To notice you made a judgment. And so what you say inside is, oh, my body just had an opinion. That's interesting. Because if you'll notice, you had a reaction to that before you had a thought. Your body reacted. That's the limbic system again. You had the body reacted 50 milliseconds before you even had a thought. The thought showed up afterwards. So it's, my body just had an opinion. That's interesting. All right, what does that do? As I mentioned before, our sensory stalk can only perceive 2 gigs of data per second. When it's that limbic system reaction, what fuels that sample? What fuels the sample is the value system that we had prior to the age of 6. Prior to the age of 6, we cannot survive on the streets alone. It's an interesting thing. The brain changes at the age of 7, between 6 and 7, at which kids can live out of dumpsters. It's not a good life. I mean, there's no question about it, but they can survive. Prior to that, there isn't any way, in fact, that they can on their own. Okay? And so they are totally dependent upon all these big people. They're taking care of them. It's kind of a scary endeavor if you think about it. Okay. So what the brain tends to do at that point is looking at What are survival issues and what are the rules? Both the spoken rules and the unspoken rules. Because if I know what the rules are, I got a better chance of surviving. That doesn't go away. They're still stuck there. They're in the limbic system. It's the first response that comes up. And if you think about it, quite often during that first response, pay attention to how old you feel. The body feels different. However, when you say, my body just had an opinion, that's interesting, you just added 5 seconds. If it's 20 gigs per second, you have just added 100 gigs, more data. You've had time to sample. So when you had that reaction, initially, that's interesting. You move it back. What you've done is you moved yourself back from the reaction. And what you'll notice is that the judgment will get softer all by itself without you doing anything. And that will allow you to be able to see more of the human in the category that you reacted to. And it just gives you that distance. 5 seconds. The old thing of count to 10, okay? There is something with that. But the acknowledgement also that said my body had a reaction moves me away from my view as being the truth. Okay? Excuse me. There are facts. You know what a fact is, and it's very confirmable. All you have to do is get a random sample of 100,000 people from the globe, present them with the same data, the same stimulation, whatever it is, and if they all agree on what it is without having to do any interpretation, that by definition is a fact. Everything else is an opinion based upon the samplings that we've had during our life. Okay, it's an opinion. It's not a fact. It's an opinion. It becomes a truth when it's, my truth, when it's my opinion that I'm tired of thinking about and I no longer want any new information that might change what it is I'm saying. So my truth is an ossification of my opinion. Okay, so what ends up happening is when we soften that, when we step back and we can see the person, we're no longer fueling. We're moving away from the 6-year-old. And by acknowledging it's our body, we acknowledge I get to own it. It's me. It's sort of like the word should. The word should is a word of, it's called a word of demand without referential index. I love the sound of that. Okay, all that it says is that it's saying that this is how it's supposed to be, but I'm not telling you whose opinion it is or who's saying it. It's just an opinion, but no one's owning it. You don't own it when you say should, okay? In fact, it owns you. But when you're able to go, my body just had a reaction, has an opinion. That's interesting. All of a sudden, I've humanized me, and I've humanized the other person, just that much more. Stress goes down. Excuse me. The brain gets a little bit bigger. Relationships. Hoo-ha. That is a huge one. I went out on a limb and gave you a download, and I'm not sure. I think I actually forgot to put page numbers on this. This is one that when I'm working with guys who have come to this conclusion, and it's shocked them that that females are not curvy guys. That during the 6th week as a fetus, the testosterone just does terrible things to a male brain. Okay, and a lot of of empathy type stuff just gets killed. It just dies. That's why guys are better for sympathy than empathy. We have great difficulty feeling someone else's pain. We feel our pain in the presence of your pain because it makes us feel bad that you have pain. And that's the part that was growing for the guy. That's why so many guys can't handle females crying, because it actually causes suffering. There's an area in the brain that is as if he's sitting on a hot stove. Okay, it's just not pretty. Okay, so this is a handout that I give him to share with his wife and ask her, does this fit? Is this something that you would like to have in your life as a relationship? Okay. So one of the things about being stuck at home is an opportunity to build the relationship, to fuel it, to just feed it, to nourish it. And some of them are extremely important because if we don't, and this is a time in which we really need to be mindful of it, it can really get in the way. One of the things that there's a husband-wife team, the Gottmans, and one of the things that they've presented is what they call the 5-to-1 ratio. And it says, in order for a relationship to grow, you have to have 5 positive communications for every negative one. The problem is, if you have a negative one and 5 positives, the negative one isn't forgotten. So it isn't like it erases it. It just allows you to keep moving forward. So it's how to increase this particular ratio is a critical piece in developing relationships that just thrive. So the first thing that I really suggest is on page 6, if you happen to have that. If not, I'll be discussing it. It's on touch, and it has to do with hugs. And there is a particular type of hug that is amazing. And we've all seen the picture of the parent, lying on the couch without a shirt and having an infant on top of the, laying skin to skin and the child is just so peaceful. And the parent is so peaceful. Okay, there's a reason behind this. The same guy who identified the Langerhans, which are the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin, identified pyramidal cells in the skin. Pyramidal cells are brain cells. Okay. Same as you've got in your brain, they're identical. They're called pyramidal cells, and they stick out of every pore that you've got in your body. Okay? And the way that it's set up is that here you've got the skin, okay, and here's the outside. And so the part of the nerve that listens to what's going on is sticking out here. The part that talks is going down there, okay? Now, when you're developing your immune system, a lot of the immune cells will go through the thymus gland to get educated. It's a rough school. Not all of them survive. Okay, but they get through and they get educated. Except that when they come out, this must be a metaphor. They really don't understand what they're doing anyway. They're kind of confused and what have you. Okay, and it floats around. The pyramidal cells, where the part that talks, that's sticking out of the, comes down there, takes a particular shape under certain circumstances. When that shape occurs, it sets up an induction field like a tractor beam from Star Trek. And that particular immune cell will come up to it and it will connect. It gives it information and it activates the immune system. And now that cell can go out and do its job. That is so cool. Okay, right? What activates it? Belly hugs. Okay? Skin to skin contact. Lift up the shirt. You can't see down there because I'm wearing a swimsuit. Okay, but so, okay, lift up the shirt. The other person lifts up the shirt. You put your bellies together and you skin to skin, you hold each other. And you hold. Okay, bad news, girls. Okay, and that is it takes guys 3 times the amount to get the same benefit you get. So just, bring something to read. Okay, because he's going to be there for a while. Okay, so it's that skin to skin contact just makes everything alive, and it wakes up the immune system and allows you, to continue going. And it's amazing how the shoulders drop. It stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. Sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. Parasympathetic nervous system is the one that's rest and digest. It's the one that deals with quieting the system. It's a beautiful thing. And just skin to skin contact, you know, and it can even be the back of a hand against a cheek. Anything that we identify as affection, but we're dealing with skin, okay? The immune system loves it, the body loves it, and if you hold it just a little bit longer, the shoulders drop. And again, the drain gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's just, but you have to do it. How difficult. Okay, good stuff. Other thing, interesting, inflammation. Yeah. Remember, SARS-2 is the thing that is the most concern that we have out of COVID-19. And SARS-CoV-2 is where inflammation goes wild. Okay, and that's where the main problem is. How do you quiet inflammation? How do you keep from adding to the inflammation? Okay. Another simple one. Very simple. And that is, here we're stuck at home. If we've been thinking about it and we're going to be systematic about it, we figure out who's going to be in charge of doing what. When we do that and taking care of the house, it takes on the quality of an obligation. In a relationship, what you do is not as important as the meaning you give behind it. Rather than having an obligation, what would happen if you did the exact same thing and you both experienced it and gave it as a gift? Remember, when you give a gift as yourself, you stabilize the immune system. When you have an obligation, you generate resentment, and resentment increases inflammation. Health comes from giving gifts to each other. So, I'm in charge of taking out the trash. What a surprise. I'm the guy, I take out the trash. Okay, that sort of thing. I make sure that they know that I do it as a gift in taking care of them, not because I have to take out the trash. Occasionally, there are different things of saying, gee, it smells, I can smell the trash from here, and if I can smell it, boy, it must be bad for you. Let me take it out so you don't have to smell it. That's a gift. The difference between obligations and gifts is the type of vocalization. Obligations usually come with grumbling. Vocalization comes with gift wrapping. When you do the gift, you have to wrap it. You have to make sure it's known that it's a gift. There are too many options and ways of doing this. That if you do some simple one, I describe it there. You notice that's the other person, your significant other or a friend, whoever. You notice that they've got a bottle of water sitting on the table next to them, and it's almost empty. And you're ready to head into the kitchen or whatever. What you do is you get up and you say, here's a good one, I noticed Hold on to that phrase. That's an important phrase. I noticed that your water's down. When I come back from the kitchen, would you like me to bring you one? That's gift wrapping. That's this, I noticed you. Really important, by the way, okay? To be noticed. That goes back to tribal history. If you didn't notice people around you, someone was going to get eaten by something. So you had to keep an eye on them. So when you tell your the person that you care about, I noticed anything. The fact that I noticed something. I noticed you had a need and you didn't ask for it. I noticed. Drain gets big. Attraction to the negative goes down. Good stuff. Okay. Also, the person has the ability to bask, if you will, in the experience of you asked. So you going to get it and then coming back, they're feeling good about themselves. Like, I'm important to you. Okay, remember, the whole key during this time is to make sure that the other person, that what you do gets the other person to feel good about themselves, not you. Okay, how you get them to feel good about themselves. Anything you can do to get someone else to feel good about themselves, they inevitably will feel good about you. That's sort of a side effect. If you try to get it the first time, directly, how you feel good about me, we're back to junior high school and I'm doing, strange things in front of girls. We've gotten past that. So we want them to feel good about themselves in our presence. And those are ways that we can do it. The last one that is during this time, there's a need for connection. And my experience is that while it does happen with guys occasionally, more often, the women in my life want to talk. They want to say things. And talk is the connection, okay? The content is actually secondary to the process of the words back and forth. When guys get upset, it locks up into the right side of the brain, makes them, that's an area that deals more with action. They want to go out and kick a tree. When a woman gets upset because of the shift in the corpus callosum and there's a tract in the back here, it immediately goes into the language centers and they have to talk about it. It's really important. Yes, this is an overgeneralization, bell-shaped curve. It's good enough to go with because it'll happen more often than not. Okay. So what it says is that sometimes she needs to talk and there may not be a point. It's okay. That the last page is called Holding the Bucket. And it's just that. In order for, and this is for you guys especially, okay? In order for your lady to really have room for you, to be present for you, if she's full, she's got to empty first. And so she's got to talk. She's got to say things. Problem is that there's a lot of data. And our conveyor belts, that's our working memory, can hold so much before things start falling off. We can't remember. And one of the greatest dreads that guys have is you're going to quiz us afterwards. Okay, on what you said. Oh my God, no, don't do that. Okay. So to make it easier, you don't have to put that much energy into listening to what she's saying. You want to listen to what it means to her. That's more important than the content. It's what it means to her, how it affected her. And you have to make sounds accordingly. Sounds that are real. They're not, yeah means get it over with. I haven't heard a word you're saying. Okay? It's, huh, oh, really? Ouch, that must have hurt. Gee, oh, I'm sorry. Huh. Okay, they're words that actually fit the mood and the message that she's giving. So she knows that you're with her on the journey. You don't have to remember all that stuff. Besides, you can't. Okay? Yeah. Most of us can remember 5 plus or minus 2 pieces of data if we're lucky. Okay? So I'm not going to remember whether it was Tuesday or Wednesday the event happened. It's not going to happen. Okay, so just listen. And at the end, it's okay to ask, wow, that was a lot of information. Out of everything that you've just told me, what's the most important thing that you want me to remember? Okay? It brings closeness. And that is an amazing thing. Got a few minutes. I had one more that's real important, and it'll take about another 20 minutes, so we're not going to do that one. Is there anybody who has any feedback or questions, observations, nasty comments?
Well, Rick, thank you so much. Those are wonderful ideas, and they're fairly easy to do if we just put our minds to it. I'm just wondering, you talked about relationships. Of course, that's important, but some people are isolated by themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and that poses a different kind of stress. So, can you speak
Absolutely.
to that at all?
Yeah. Well, in dealing, if we're talking about people who are, uh, oh, my experience is that's a person by person thing. Okay, that I've actually purposely not generalized that type of thing, because what it means to us, what the history has been. Do people contact us? Do we contact them? Do they have um, smartphones? Um, that is so absolutely huge. That would be um, a whole separate talk, number one. But number two, I would only be talking to one person at a time on that. So I don't think that I've got more than the mindfulness, being present in the moment, um, giving permission if during that time there's that feeling of loss. I don't have a handout here for that. People have to take notes, or they're gonna, listen to this on the YouTube or whatever it is later on. There's a 3-step that I would suggest for most of us if there's that feeling of loss during this time. Okay? And that first one is, what a surprise, light a candle. The candle gives a focus. It gives something that's present. There's an awareness and acknowledging what actually I'm feeling the loss about. The second step has to do with a gratitude prayer, a gratitude experience. And that is to think about something that you have gratitude for that you did not own. It could be the fact of how beautiful clouds are. It could be the nature of trees. It could be I tend to choose natural things, nature, but I'm also a scientist. So when I flick on a switch when I come into my office and turn on the lights, my first thought is, that is so cool. That's 10,000 years of humans standing on each other's shoulders. So I could just flick a switch and that works. That is so cool. Okay, that's me. Okay. So it's finding something that I have gratitude for. But in this particular case, it's to remember a particular event that in which that gratitude occurred. Okay, it was a base. I remember when I used to ride horses and go up in the mountains and all that sort of thing, and so my gratitude would be for trees. I think trees are absolutely cool. Okay, and uh, I remember a time in which I was up in the mountains with the horse, leaning against a tree. There's a little stream going by, and I am just reading. And the amount of just peace and contentment I felt was amazing in that. Okay, so I bring back that memory and I get in touch with the gratitude and the memory, and I get in touch as strong as I can. And if I do, to the point that I naturally start feeling myself smile and the eyes kind of crinkle. And at the point that it touches the eyes, I go, thank you. I just put it out there. Thank you. Okay. I'm not even thinking about who I'm thanking. Okay. The receiver isn't as important as I'm giving it out there. Thank you. Okay. Then you get 3 pages of pieces of paper, lined paper, and you start writing on one side of the page. That's it. Okay. It doesn't matter what you write. The only difference is it has to be prose. It can't be outlines. It can't be poetry, bullet points, none. It has to be just whatever you're writing, you're just writing. Cool. Okay. When you finish that page, one side, fold it in half, set it aside. Start the second page. Write. Third page, write. You're done. Okay. If at the end of 2 pages, you don't have anything else to say, keep writing. Even if it is, this is the dumbest assignment Landis has ever given to me, and the next time I give it to him, I'm going to have him eat it. And I mean, it doesn't matter what you say, okay? It could be, but it has to be prose. If at the end of 3 pages, you've got more to say, stop. Only 3, written only on one side, fold it in half, take those 3 pages, burn them. And then crush the ashes so that there's no way you could identify that they ever were pieces of paper. And you do that, what a surprise, for 7 days. And then you repeat that once a week as long as you're home. What that does to the unconscious is it connects you to the eternal part of you. What's really important. Insights start coming up, realizations start coming up. There's relief. This is one of the, functionally, in terms of how the brain works, this is the core process in most, like we're talking about like 90%, 99, 95% of the morning rituals, starting with the Assyrians coming up. It is that's what the brain does with all the different resources. It covers actually about 80% of what all those different rituals do. And it allows us to literally release, to be present. It nurtures. Okay.
Hey, do people have questions on? I'm going to cancel Spotlight. We're going to go to Gallery View, and everybody can. Or people are hiding behind their black boxes. Anyway, does anybody have any questions for Dr. Landis?
I do not know winning lottery numbers, so let's not start with that one.
Okay, well,
Okay.
it looks like people have understood what you've said, and hopefully we'll be able to practice some of it.
Yeah.
And I thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us and for
my pleasure.
Helping us cope with stress. And this is very useful, even if we weren't under COVID. But now that we're under COVID, we have lots of time to try all of this.
Okay. And if anyone does have questions, especially about any of the handouts or anything, please feel free to email me, and we can make that email available.
And if Carol says thank you so much. Yeah, if somebody didn't get the handouts, email me and I'll make sure you get them. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.